Astro has a superpower and it's called content collections. Now they've actually just added a new layer called the content layer as part of Astro 5. It's in beta right now and I want to just take a very first look at it. Now if this gets updated, I'll try to remember to add a video card right here so you can jump to the new updated version, but at least for now this is kind of how it works. Now there's a lot here, but essentially what it's letting you do is pour in any data from any source and then use Astro's content collections. You get the benefit of using schemas. You can even add transformations using Zod, which we're not going to do today, but I hope to show how to do that in the future. And then there are actually community loaders that I'll show you towards the end of the video where you can actually pull in things like Notion or Strapi data directly into Astro's content collections. And the really nice thing is you can basically swap out your data sources as long as you transform it and get the data out the right way. You can basically use it wherever you want on your site. So we'll look at that some in future weeks, but at least for now, I just want to show you kind of the bare basics of how it works and why you might want to use this new content layer for content collections. You ready? Let's jump in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris and welcome to Coding in Public. All right, let's look at this new content layer in Astro 5. Now, I have gone ahead and updated the base blog template to use this, and that's what I've got right here. We're going to look at this in 3 different steps. First of all, I want to show how you can convert something like this that uses the traditional content collection to use the new content layer. Secondly, we're going to look at using a local data file. And then finally, we will look at using a API endpoint. All right, so let's do that in that order. First of all, right inside here, there's not a whole lot we need to do. This type of content, we no longer actually want to use it this way. And the reason is we're going to instead use what's called a loader. Now, you can right now still use the type of content and just locally load those files. However, I think eventually it sounds like they're going to move everything over to these loaders, and all you're going to do is basically point it to wherever you want it to be. Now, there are 2 different functions you get here. One of them is called glob, and the other one is called file. So first of all, we're going to look at glob because what we're going to do is grab all the files in a particular directory. Now, first of all, I need to make sure this comes from Astro loaders, so that should pop in right here. And then inside here, we're going to have an object. First of all, we want this to have a pattern. What we're going to do is say, hey, everything that matches this pattern in the directory I give you. In this case, basically, I'm going to say anything in a folder or subfolder that I'm going to give you that has the extension MD or MDX. All right, comma, MDX like that. All right, next after the pattern, I need to actually give it that base folder. So let's call this base. And then I'm just going to point this to my SRC. Then we'll look at content and blog. Now let's finally do a comma here. And now what I'm saying is, hey, load everything from this location. So what it's going to do is look inside of here and look for any markdown or MDX files. And it's essentially the same as what we currently had, except now we're using this loader syntax. So it's a little bit more verbose with local files, and it may be that I'm not understanding how this works, but right now, again, you can still use the old format if you're using local files, but I wanted to show you how you might do this with like a glob structure. Now, this doesn't even have to be something inside of your SRC directory technically. It can be anywhere on your directory or your computer at all, but obviously, usually this would be connected to your actual project. Okay, so with that said, now what we're going to do is jump into the blog, and you're going to notice that it's still working. However, if I come in here, you'll notice I'm getting undefined. So let's go ahead and check to see what's happening. If I come over to pages and blog and index, let's jump over here. You'll notice that I'm passing along all of this as a bunch of cards. So down here, I'm looking at the post.slug. Well, let's come back up top here and now look at what we're getting with these posts. I'm going to go ahead and console log this. And I should see this. I've got Console Ninja working here. Hopefully this will show it to me. Here we go. You'll notice there's an ID and metadata where we've got titles, descriptions, so all the front matter stuff, and then the body. But I no longer have a slug. And that's what I'm trying to reference down this way. So all I need to do now is come inside here, and you could rename this in the config if you want to as well. But I'm going to just pass this to post dot. And if I do dot, you'll notice now I've got this ID. So let's go ahead and point it that direction. Now if I come inside here, it should be pointing to the right place, Markdown Style Guide. But now we've got another problem. And so let's come over here. We're going to look at this slug entry here. You'll notice I'm getting this post. However, I'm awaiting the post.render. Now, this is no longer a method that's going to live in the content collection. Instead, we're going to pull in a render function and then render out the content. So I will go ahead and await, but not post.render. Instead, I'm going to pull in from astro:content, the render function, and then pass it my post. Now, that's going to allow me to get my content down here, but I still don't actually have the slug because this is now post.id. So now if I come back over this way and refresh, you'll notice I get both of those. Now, just to note what this would look like if I did post.render, you'll notice that it just throws an error because it doesn't know what to do because post.render is no longer a method. So those are the couple little switches you'll have to make. So not too much, just swapping out the slugs for the IDs, unless I'm misunderstanding that, and then grabbing the render function from content collections. So that's how you would convert it to use the new method. Secondly, let's talk about using a data file. Now, this is already a pattern that was available. In fact, you could have a type of data as one of your content collections and pass in like JSON files, for instance, or YAML files. Well, now what we can do is anywhere, and it could be inside the same content directory, but I'm just going to create another one called data. And inside here, I'm going to go ahead and add a file. Let's call this something like pizzas.json, because who doesn't need more pizzas? Now here, I'm just going to go ahead and paste in an array of objects. These are just things that have IDs. They have a pizza name and ingredients. Now, importantly, just like we saw earlier, you have to have an ID on each of these items. So the ID here is just a number, but it could be whatever. So in this case, now that I've got all this structure, I'm going to go ahead and come over here. We're just going to const export a pizza right here. Actually, we'll call this pizzas. We'll define a collection. And here we've got the same kind of pattern. Now, you'll remember I said we had a glob helper, and we also have what's called a file helper. So we'll go loader. And then here I'm just going to do file, and this should also come from Astro : or / loaders. I pulled that in right there. And now what we're going to do is give it a path to an actual file. This will just be inside my src data pizzas.json. So now that I'm getting this, I can optionally define a schema. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't want to use a schema, because that's kind of the whole point, is you get this type safety. So I'm going to come in here and do schema like this, and I'm saying here's what the object should look like. So let's use a Zod here. We're going to grab the object. And I'm going to say ID is z.number, and then we'll have pizza name, and this will be z.string. And finally, we'll have ingredients. This is just an array of strings. All right, now that I've got this, let's go ahead and export it down this way since we've defined it. Now I should have access to this wherever I want to use it. So let's come over here to my index. We'll just look at the home route here, and let's get rid of all this because we'd rather have pizza. All right, like this, let's go ahead and grab a UL. And inside this UL, we're going to go ahead and loop through our pizzas. So we have to get those pizzas first. So I'm going to come up top here and say const pizzas. You can call this whatever you want, but since the collection is called that, let's go ahead and do the same thing. So I'll say await get collection. And here I'm just going to look for my pizzas. You'll notice it already knows it's there, and it should actually know the structure of it as well since I defined that config. So I'll come in here and say pizzas.map. And for each of these, I just want to grab my pizza, and I'm going to put it inside of a li. So what I could do, maybe this is the best thing to do, right? Let's have the pizza name. So here I'll say pizza.data. And we'll grab the pizza name. Now to make this easier, I could just destructure data right here. So maybe that's the better thing to do. Then I can just grab the pizza name. And then perhaps inside here, I'll have the same kind of little thing. Well, we'll map over this a second time to kind of get this nested array. So I'm going to grab my data.ingredients.map. And for each of these ingredients, we'll then just pass back an li. All right, hopefully we did that correctly. Let's come back to the home route and see if we did our pizzas right. Yeah, there we go. So there's our pizzas with all the different toppings we might have, the ingredients. Now, obviously the benefit here is you don't have to define a bunch of separate files. You can simply use a single data file that has all your stuff directly in here. And sometimes if you're bringing stuff, structure over from another project, this is the method you'll have. And so it's nice to be able to just grab this, throw it in a loader, and then get all the benefits of content collections. So we looked at those two different kind of helpers you get, the glob and the file. Now, I also want to talk about using this for remote data. We've looked at local data, both kind of in the blog and the data. So let's come over this way. We're going to now look at remote data. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to say const countries like this, and we'll just define a collection. And here I'm going to grab a loader. And in this case, what I want to do is actually have an async function. So I'm going to return here an async function that's going to grab my response. We'll just do await fetch. And I'll add in this API route that's just a get API route. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our data here and await response.json. Now, you have to actually return an array of entries. You can also do an object where the key is the ID and the entries are the value. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and just return this data.map. And I'm just going to take this as a country and then return here. What we'll do is, first of all, you have to always have an ID explicitly mentioned here. And I need to actually return this as an object. So let's grab our ID. We'll just do country.cca3. Now, if we were to look at this endpoint, maybe we should go ahead and do that just so we can see what we've got. I'm going to come over this way. You'll notice that this CCN3 is one of these, or CCA3, wherever that happens to be. I'm not seeing it right now, but CCA3. There we go. All right, so it's got these unique keys, so that's what we're using to set this off as the ID. And then let's also grab the name. It looks like it's under name and common, so let's go ahead and do that as well. Now you could actually define more here as well, so country.name.common, and you could just spread in the rest of this as well, country, so you have access to all of it if you want it. And then once again, optionally here, we can define a schema. Now this is just going to be an object as well from Zod, where we'll then pass along an ID, This will be a z.string since that's what type this CCA3 is. And then finally, let's just have the name for now. So this will be z.string as well. So there are other things we're obviously passing along here as well since we're spreading and everything, but these are the only two things we're defining on our schema. Now this right here doesn't know what type it is. For now, I'm just going to say this is type of any, and then let's go ahead and just export this. So countries like this. Now let's come back over this way, and let's say above the hello astronaut here, we're going to go ahead and grab the countries as well. So I'll come in here and grab countries, and this will be from our collection of countries. So the really nice thing here is I'm taking in remote data and then using all the powers of content collections to then process that and allow me to have this nice type safety as well. So let's go ahead and come down this way. And again, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. So let's have a UL, I guess, here. And then inside here, we'll have my countries.map. Well, I'll take each of my countries and I'm just going to loop through this. And for now, since I know I only have two things that I've kind of defined here, we're just going to say the c.data. And then we've got name. All right, and I come over here and save, and we are getting nothing. So let's see what's going on. If I jump up top here, let's go ahead and console log this. And I'm assuming I'm getting an empty array, and I am. So I think I'm actually breaking this because I'm just telling it it's here, but it only knows these two items. Now, it actually knows that there's more here, so it's not working properly. So I think what I need to do is actually get rid of this. It's only going to return what it knows it has, and this would be the ID and the name. So now I'm actually getting this name back, and that's working properly. Now, obviously, we've written our own loaders these 3 times. We've used 2 different kind of helpers it gives us, and then we've written our own async function. Now, you can do your own stuff, and in fact, it's not too difficult, as you can see right here, but there are actually also helps you can get. So if I jump over this way, I'm going to come over to the blog, and you'll notice that they've actually got some community loaders. I hope to do something on Cloudinary very soon, but here are some other community loaders as well. One for Notion and Stripe and FeedLoader, Airtable, and Strapi. These are all kind of like beta or in beta right now, so you can play with these, but you'll notice that all it does is give you a loader where you pass in some kind of auth token or database ID, in this case for Notion, and then you can pass in filters and then just export this as a content collection. So you can basically get your data from anywhere, including stuff like Notion, as long as you're using some simple loader here. Now you could write this yourself, but to have some of these kind of built-in loaders is really helpful. These have been developed, I think, mostly by these companies or just others who are interested parties who are interested in it. So to be able to pull in Stripe or Airtable or all this kind of stuff, or eventually, like I said, I'm going to show hopefully next week on Cloudinary how you can pull in assets from your digital asset manager. Now, it's cool to be able to pull in data from wherever you want, and this is what the content layer gives you. I think the really neat use case, though, is that you can switch your data whenever you want to from one service to another, and as long as it follows the same structure in the end, you'll know that wherever you're consuming that throughout your application, it'll always have the exact same structure. And that's really, I think, where this power will come into play as we continue to explore how to use the content layer. Well, if you're interested more in Astro 5 or my thoughts as it develops, make sure to subscribe to not miss anything. Thanks so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.